Hey everyone, welcome back to KC3D Sparks. Today we're going to be creating our snake, or our poisonous snake, should I say. That's from the monster manual, so it's still kind of related to what I want to do with this dungeon, but we are almost taking a break and doing more of a creature that we can add into this and can also use in many other campaigns. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead, just hop to a blank layer. Make sure that in your scenes tab, you have the unit that you prefer to work in. I'll be working in inches, and I changed the scale of my grid floor to 1/4 of an inch. So with that, we'll go ahead and do Shift A, mesh, and we're gonna start with a cube. I'm gonna go ahead and rename this to snake, because this is going to be the beginning. So let's go ahead, just tab into edit mode. We're gonna do Control R, so we can get this loop right here. We'll do left click, right click, so it just stays in the middle. Gonna hit 1, focus in on that, A to deselect, C for wireframe view, B for border select to grab these vertices over here, X, and we're just gonna delete those vertices. Come over here to our wrench modifier tab, and we'll go ahead and add a mirror modifier. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply clipping so that way these don't separate. Once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to face select, grab this face and this face, and we're actually going to delete those as well. That way we just get this hollow circle essentially. Alright, so I want to do Control R again. I'm going to scroll up once so I get 2 loops, and then just left click and right click. And I actually want to go ahead and do Control R, left click, right click, so we get that split in half. I'm going to do Control R to the bottom to make that match, and I'm actually going to pull that over to the right, just like that. And pull it up a little bit, and you'll see why later. Okay. So first, I want to go ahead and do a subdivision surface modifier before we start adding more detail. And usually, I like to do 3 for the view. That's personal preference. You guys can figure out what you would like best, but 3 is usually pretty good for me. I'm going to go ahead, grab this loop. So I'm just Alt right clicking. I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to pull this up to start rounding out our snake body a little bit. I'm going to do Control R to add a loop here so that we can pull this out to start making that a little bit circular as well. We could have started with a circle, but I decided to just start with the cube instead so that we have our basic size all set up. Now for this part, the reason I added this extra loop here is I'm going to do Shift E on this loop. So this is going to start creating that separate seam, so the belly scales look a little bit separated from the actual side scales. So I'm going to grab these 2 loops and I'm going to pull them up more like that. Now don't worry too much. You'll notice that it's really nice and crisp here, but on the sides it starts to flare out. Once we apply more sections of the body, this will fix itself. So as long as the whole strip is pink, you know that it's sharp and it'll fix itself, like I said. So don't worry too much about this flare out. Okay, so now I want to start adding a spike. So for the spike, I just want this face here. I'm going to go into side view, hit E to extrude, and pull that up. About there, size that in, and I want to do E to extrude again, pull that up and size that in. Actually, I want to do more like that. And I'll also, to make it look like it's not morphing into it, I want to go ahead and do Shift E around that to make sure it does look like a connected spike and not something that's just morphing into it. And I want to do that Shift E to just give it a nice clean separation. Now I also want to do a Control R here. I'm just going to slide it up and pull that up a little bit more. Do another Control R, bring it up pretty close to where that other loop is. And I'm just going to grab and pull that out a little bit and do another Shift E. So that way we can start getting this top scale also a little bit more separated. Now, I also want to do for this top scale, kind of create more of a ridge, so that way it looks like, you know, it's kind of layered scales. So what I'm going to do is another Control R, bring that pretty far back, maybe right about there. And I just want to go ahead and have these top 3 selected. I'm going to go into side view and just hit G to grab it and start pulling it up and over. Maybe more like that. And we can go ahead and grab those. So that way we can start rounding it out a little bit more like this. Like that. Bring that in a little bit. Now it's pretty flat. I want to go ahead and just do Control R, left click, right click. Grab these top 3 again and we bring that back like that to make it a little bit thicker. That's a pretty good start to our shape. Now for the spike, I don't want it to be straight up and down. What I want to do is go ahead and grab this top face. And this part you can play around with a little bit. You could start grabbing more of the vertices down here as well. But for me, I'm just going to grab those top 4 vertices and I'm going to do Shift W, and that brings up the warp tool. So with that, you'll notice it brings up an arrow with the dotted line, just like the size and rotation tool. So if you just start moving your mouse around, you'll be able to figure out which direction and how exactly you would want your spike to look. So I'm thinking I'd like mine about there. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm happy with that shape. So like I said, take your time, do Shift W to bring up the warp tool and kind of play around with what shape you would like. And feel free to grab more vertices to warp them as well, that kind of thing. But for me, I found the top 4 for this type of spike work just fine for me. Okay, so now I want to see how this will look on the actual whole snake. So actually, it's really large right now. So it's over 6 inches. I'm going to go ahead and just size the whole thing down to, let's do a little less than 1/2 inch for now. So yeah, that works. Now I want to go to add modifier and we're going to do array. And I'm going to go ahead and move that above our subdivision surface modifier, but not above our mirror modifier. So you'll notice that it put it side by side. That's not quite right. We want to go ahead and change this X offset to 0. And we want to change our Y offset. And we'll just start with 1 and see how it looks. Okay, it's the right direction, but it's a little far apart. So what we can do is instead of typing it in, we can just go ahead and manually scroll it, which looks like, okay, about there. I'm gonna hide our subdivision surface modifier so we can see it a little bit easier in wireframe view. It's still a pretty big overlap. So between 8 and 7, so let's try, okay, 7.5 is too large. 7.3, there's still a small gap. 7.2 is pretty good. Let's do 7.25. That looks perfect. It's not a gap. They're not quite touching, but that's okay. When we check this merge box, we can increase our distance so that way you'll notice that line pops into a singular one. So once you get it close enough, you'll be able to check and see that there is no gap once it is merged. Awesome. But clearly we want our snake a little bit longer than this. So I did test this out earlier. I found that I wanted mine to be about 20 in length. It seemed to be a pretty good one, and then we can taper it off once the array is applied. But the reason I didn't apply the mirror or the subdivision or anything is so that way, once you get it all synced up, it's good to pause here, look at your snake shape, make sure that you're happy with it, because you can still go back, modify these little pieces. So let's say, okay, this isn't quite dramatic enough. I want this to be a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to grab this loop, pull this up, grab this loop, pull that up. Maybe we'll pull this one out. Okay, so let's say you're happy with that. So make sure you are happy with your tweaks for this body part first. And then before you apply everything, I would recommend, while in object mode, you can do Shift D to duplicate it, hide your original so you can always go back and make changes layer by layer, essentially. That way you don't have to do multiple save files and all that fun stuff. But go ahead, now I'll go ahead and apply our mirror modifier and our array, but I'm gonna leave the subdivision surface modifier unapplied because obviously we still have some more work to do to our snake. So I'm gonna go ahead and tab into edit mode, make sure everything still looks good. So I only need to look at one. So we'll grab our edge loop here and we'll make sure that if we pull this in a direction, there's no holes or gaps or anything that open up, which it looks pretty good. So you don't have to worry about that. One thing I forgot to do was I would prefer this edge to actually be sharp. So you can already tell that I forgot to do something. That's another important reason that you would want to duplicate, so that way I don't have to worry about going back, doing Shift or Control Z, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to tab back out, X, delete this one, unhide the original, tab back into edit mode, get this edge, deselect these, Shift E to get our crease in there. See, that separates our scales much more cleanly and it's a little bit more defined. I like that better. I might even bring these up a little more and back out. Okay. Anyway, so let me do Shift D again, apply the mirror and the array, tab back in, and everything is good. Now, to taper off the tail, I'm gonna go ahead, just do Alt right click, oops, this last edge loop here, do E to extrude, and I'm just gonna pull that out, maybe about here, do E to extrude, just pull it out a little bit, E to extrude again, do Alt M at center, and that will close that off for us, and I might pull that out a little bit as well. Now for our snake shape, obviously we don't want it to be a straight tube. Usually they'll taper off. So I'm going to go down here to our proportional editing and hit connected. So with this last vertice, I'm also going to do Shift Alt right click for this last loop as well, and I'm going to hit S for size, and you'll notice that that white ring comes up. So I'm going to probably increase that with the scroll wheel pretty large. And actually I'm going to scroll out so I can see the full snake. Okay, so I'm going to leave it about there and size it down maybe about there, and maybe fix just the taper a little bit better. So let's do S, scroll in, get that taper, stretch it out a little bit, maybe turn this off. Oops. Actually turn it off. Taper that out. Cool. So you'll notice with that, that also changes up our spikes a little bit, which is nice because usually snakes don't have all of their spikes nice and uniform anyway, so it's cool to give it a little bit more variation. It looks like you put a lot more effort into it. That whole kind of thing. But I had the circle be about here, so our original spikes still look about the same. And it's still kept kind of like that longer scale on there, so it still looks like it's a part of it. It doesn't just like suddenly turn into a circle and taper out. Now for the head, I'm gonna go ahead and obviously we'll grab this one. So Alt right click, I'm gonna focus in on it with a number pad period. And we're going to actually, instead of modeling it onto here, we're gonna separate it so that way we can do another mirror modifier and all that fun stuff. So to separate this loop, first I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate it. So I'm going to hit Shift D, and you'll notice that gives you a whole nother circle. I'm just going to right click so it pops where it originally was and just pull it along the Y axis a little bit, just to give us a little bit of separation. Now to separate these two meshes, I'm just going to hit P, and it'll come up with a menu, and obviously we have it already selected, so I'm just going to do selection. I'm going to tab back into object mode. Just select our new one, so we're just going to change this to head, and we can tab into edit mode for the snake head. And it's nice because it already has the exact setup, so we can start creating the neck and the head right off of this shape. But obviously, like I said, I want to do a mirror modifier, so we'll deselect everything, border select this half, do X, delete those vertices, add modifier, and we'll do mirror, and make sure clipping is applied as well. Now obviously you're not going to see anything because it's just a loop. Yeah, you just can't see it. So we'll grab our whole loop. I'm just going to go ahead and go into top view, hit E to extrude, and just hit escape. And if we start pulling this way, you'll notice that it's shaded a little bit darker. That's because our normals are facing inward instead of outward. So we'll actually pull it back to meet our snake. And some of the normals are still wrong, so we might as well just fix this now before we get too far and confuse ourselves. So we'll just select everything, spacebar, start typing in normals, and we'll just go down here to make normals consistent. You'll notice that the colors change. That means the normals are correct. If you ever want to check that, you could open the transform menu by hitting the N key. Go down here to mesh display. You'll see a little section for normals. And you can click on one of those buttons and it'll show you with this blue line which way the normals are facing, and they're all facing out, which is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to turn that back off and hide that menu. Okay, so now that we have that set up, I'm just going to do Alt right click on this loop out here, pull that out a little bit more, and actually we'll do E to extrude again, pull that maybe about here, and this will become more of our neck. So we'll grab this loop, do S and X to size that in a little bit, to give it a little bit of a difference. And that way these two loops are the same exact size and we don't have to worry about resizing it to be the same. A little bit easier. So Alt right click this one again. I'm going to hit E to extrude, pull that out, do S and X and size that out. E to extrude, S and X, maybe more like that. E to extrude, pull it out again. We're going to size along the X this way. E to extrude, pull that out. We'll do another size in. E to extrude, pull that out. Like that. And I'm actually going to go ahead and add a loop in there. About there. Okay, so you can kind of see where our snake head shape is coming from. So kind of have our neck and then the cheeks, so our eyes are going to be popping out somewhere around here, and we'll size the snout down a little bit. So that's why I added in this extra loop. So I'm going to go into side view, do Z for wireframe view, border select these, and we can bring this down. Kind of like that. I might actually Bring them out a little bit. Now for this part, because the snake's nose is usually kind of more angled, so what we'll do is grab this loop and we're gonna rotate it like this. Pull that out. Just get a little bit more of an accurate shape. Maybe taper it in a little bit more. No, maybe not. Okay. So let's try that and see how it goes. So first we're just going to go ahead and close this off. So we'll grab 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to hit F for face. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops. 4. Face. Alright, so this is where it's going to get a little bit funky. Before we start closing those off, first I'm going to go ahead and just move this out. Pull this down to start smoothing this out a little bit. So pull that down along the Z. And you'll notice we're getting this weird seam here. That's because we have the mirror after the subdivision. So we'll go ahead and pop that up to make that smooth. So that's our first fix. So since it's getting a little bit weird here, because you'll notice that we have this vertex over here, but we're missing essentially that loop to close off over here. So to fix that, we're gonna go ahead, grab this vertice and this vertice, so you know, this edge, W and subdivide it so we get another vertice here. Now I'm gonna do that to this edge as well. Hit W, subdivide, grab those two vertices and hit J to join. So that way it goes across completely. Now we can go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, face, 1, 2, 3, 4, and face. That way we can keep our quads nice and neat. So now we can go ahead and start adding in our eye shape and our nostrils and maybe some other details. I wouldn't mind adding some spikes on his head as well to kind of make his body seem appropriate. Alright, so for the eye shape, we want to go ahead and grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to start with these 6 vertices, and I'm going to just hit E to extrude and size that in a little bit. And we're going to size this appropriately. So we want to go ahead and bring this down. Maybe pull this up. Pull these up. Maybe pull these in. Let me pull this down. Start being more like that. Pull this out. Make sure our eye shapes stick with the shape of the head. Okay, so if we do E to extrude again, size that in, and we can push that back. And then I'm actually going to grab that vertice, push that back even more dramatically. E to extrude, size that in, and then we can start pulling it back out. This is still a little misshapen for a snake eye. Usually they're a bit more round, and this is kind of, I don't even know what shape this is. So before we did all those extrusions, you might have seen it a little bit easier than I did for what shape this was creating. I'm gonna go ahead and start fixing this up now to make this more circular. So let's grab these, okay, rotate them. Like that. Straighten that out. And one of our problems is our eye kind of dimples in, and eyes definitely don't dimple inward. I'm gonna go ahead and do a loop here. Grab this vertice so we can pull that out to help with our eye shape itself. Now also, to create a better separation, I'm gonna grab that loop there, do Shift E to definitely make it look like it's a little bit more of the eyeball separated from the skin. Grab that, pull that up. And we can also bring these out and these guys in. There we go, that's a little better. Push that back. So to create some more of the actual eye ridge, I want to go ahead and just drag these two up to make it a little bit more dramatic. We'll actually want this eyeball a little bit bigger. So if we do, actually deselect that, grab these, pull this up, but of course you want to make sure that these don't overlap at all. Sorry guys, this is getting a little sloppy. There we go, we're like that. Grab this. I actually want this to kind of come out. Start creating more of that eye ridge, like I said. Pull this up. And then to kind of complement that with the head shape itself, I'm gonna grab these three, also pull them up a little bit. But I want this eye ridge to be pretty dramatic, so we're gonna pull that up like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and grab this whole eye, pull it back, size it up. It's too small. Pull these out a little bit. This part's a little bit more freeform. You guys can, of course, do what you like with these, or this part, that is. Now for the spikes, like I said, I want to add some spikes. There's, actually did Google images of actual horned snakes, and there's this one that has horns directly above its like eye ridge. And I really liked that one. I thought it was pretty cool looking. So I'm going to go ahead and imitate it a little bit by grabbing these four faces here. So I know that seems like a very odd selection, but we're just going to try it out. Do E to extrude and we'll size that in. And you'll notice that it really messes up a bunch of that shape, but we want to go ahead and do S and Z to try and flatten that out and kind of fix some of that. And we're going to hit W and smooth to smooth back into the original shape. Let's pull that back out. We'll do E to extrude again. And this part will actually be these spikes. So we'll do SZ0. And I'm just going to go into top view and reshape this out. So if we grab these vertices, do SX0, slide that over. We'll also do SX0 just to really flatten these out. And then we can grab 1, 2, 3, 4, do S, and bring those in to round out that. Go ahead and do Shift E to this bottom part here, and you pull it up. Oops. Go on a side view, maybe size that in a little bit, hit E to extrude, and pull that up. wasn't that thick on the bottom, but we do want it to be thicker anyway for the printing process, so that way it actually shows up. So I'm kind of okay with it. But if you don't want it to be straight up, you could always imitate the way that the spikes are. So you could do the Shift W again for the warp tool and kind of angle those back, which I think I will leave. And it's a pretty subtle bend. I'm not doing it quite like this, so that way it's a little bit more unique for the head itself. And also, so once we have that, I want to make sure I got the nostril shape. So if we go into front view, I'm gonna pull this over slightly. I'm gonna go ahead and grab these 6 vertices, sorry, hit E to extrude and just size that in. Oops, except actually, we need to turn clipping off first. So after grabbing those 6, we'll hit E to extrude, size that in so that way it actually separates from this center, or else it's not going to work properly. Then we can reattach clipping so that way it doesn't separate. Okay, grab these 2, size them apart to make it a little bit more round. Size that in a little bit. I also want to be more of a ridge for it as well, so I'm going to bring these up kind of dramatically. Okay, bring that up. E to extrude, size that in, pull this back down. E to extrude again, and we're just going to go ahead and pull that back. And to the left a little bit, size it in. Be just like that. And of course, I think I might pull this out a little bit so it's less flat. A little bit more definition there. So I'm happy with that shape. It's looking pretty good. I could of course go back into the eye shape and fix that to be nicer, because I'm definitely not the happiest with it, but for now, for the tutorial, it's alright. So next, you probably want this snake to look a little bit scarier, and actually I want to compare the size real quick. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode and just kind of see if the snake head matches the body, which I think it does. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead, tab back into edit mode so we can start making the mouth. So we'll do a separation. So actually I'm gonna have to do a Control R, and we're gonna add a loop here. Now for the mouth itself, obviously I want it to go across here, so we'll go ahead, grab these 2 vertices and hit J to join, which is unfortunate because that does create 2 triangles, but we're not animating it, so I'm not too upset. It is just being printed, so we'll just go ahead and leave it. All right, so for mouth, I want to do these all the way to probably about here for our mouth. So I'm just gonna hit V to rip it, and I'm gonna have my mouse above to make sure it rips in that direction and just pull that up. Oh, but actually you'll notice it starts to separate back there, so I'm gonna undo that and deselect this one and then hit V, so that way the jaw joint is right here instead of back here. That would make more sense. So we have that, we just pulled it up, and I actually want to pull it out a little bit. Make sure this doesn't come back. We need to bring that back out. And we can start getting all of these, and I'm just gonna bring it straight down at first, and we can worry about shaping it out after. So we'll grab that. Start getting our mouth shape. Now of course snakes can obviously open their mouths pretty wide. We're not gonna do the full extension, we're just gonna do it like it's hissing. Typically when a snake is hissing, it also, the top of the head, I believe, I don't know if that's true for all snakes, I'm not an animal expert, so you know, we'll grab this, kind of rotate, actually I'm gonna grab this as well, rotate that and draw that up. Should be more like that. Now, of course, later when we rig it, it will be a little different as well. But for right now, this will be fine. So if we do this like that. So that will get our basic shape down. And like I said, for the rigging, we can move it a little bit more. But now we can model the inside of the mouth and add his fangs. Or her. So let's do Control R, and that will grab this whole loop here, which is perfect. So we'll just do E to extrude. We're gonna pull that in along the X and then pull it back along the Y. And I'm also just gonna go ahead and size it in towards everything and start just moving it as we need to. And if you notice, if you come up here, this did separate, so we want to make sure we push these back. Oh, because I forgot to apply clipping. Oops. So we want to make sure we push these back and make sure that they snap together. Make sure that this one, there we go. Make sure this isn't loose. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, guys. Please make sure that you have your clipping applied, or else you'll be like me and wondering why your stuff is coming apart. Okay, I'm gonna pull this in a little bit extra. So that's a pretty good start. I do want to have this be back up a little bit more. There we go. So now I'll grab the whole thing again, do E to extrude, just push that in and maybe pull it back. And this needs to be pulled back up to match. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure that there we go. We can actually pull these up here. If you'll notice, it went down below there, so we need to pull it up. So we can start closing our mouth off. So there's no exact science for this part. Just kind of, you know, try to keep it as clean as you can. So that way it's a nice, smooth mouth for you. For the top, kind of do the same, pull that out. Do another extrusion, size it in, and pull it back. Okay, I don't really need this going too much further back, so this is probably a little bit too far, honestly. We'll bring this back forward, and we're gonna pull them out. But I like that distance, so if we can grab, let's do those four, and then we'll fix that one as in a second. Go into top view and pull those back, and we're just gonna go ahead and do SY, size them, grab that other vertex we left behind, push right in there, and kind of straighten those out. But of course they are below, so we want to make sure, I'm gonna grab these ones first, push them back up, make sure we get that thickness in the mouth still, grab these guys, pull them back up, just like that. All right, kind of same thing with the top. I'm gonna push these over and pull them back. And then we can see what we left behind, which is mainly these two. And we can start facing them off. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Face that. I'm going to turn off our subdivision surface modifier since it's just kind of getting in the way at the moment. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Face that off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Face. 2, 3, 4. Face. 1, 2, 3, 4. Face. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we'll do face, this and this, W, subdivide, grab this vertice and this vertice, hit J for join to make sure we don't have another 5 here. So that will work pretty good. And while our subdivision surface is off, I also want to go ahead and grab these two here and pull this out and size that in. So that way it's like kind of our extra webbing for the mouth that the snake typically has. Pull this up, just kind of smooth it out a little bit. So that way we don't have our subdivision surface modifier doing all the work. Pull that out, pull that out. And size that in even more, pull it out, and you unhide that. And that looks pretty good. This looks a little awkward though, so we want to probably bring these in to be more like that. Okay, so now we can add in some teeth, which we really just want to do the 2 fangs. We don't have to worry about much else. So for fangs, we probably want to go ahead and grab these 6, do an E to extrude, size them in, and start shaping them properly. So we'll grab these 2, pull them up, pull this in, pull this in, like that to round it out. Go into the side view to make sure there's nothing crazy going on, which there kind of is. So we want to do S and Z and just kind of flatten it and then rotate it to be more like that. Perfect. And I actually want to pull it back some. Make it a little bit more round than oblong. Okay, and then we'll grab that whole circle, go into side view, do E to extrude. I'm just going to pull it down, size it, E to extrude again, size it, and grab that. Awesome. So now, of course, we want to go ahead and apply our snake head to the snake body, but just like before, in case we want to make tweaks later on, I'm going to do Shift D to get an extra one, hide the original, oops, wrong one, hide the original. Now, of course, we want to go ahead after we duplicate it, we want to apply our mirror modifier first, and then we can go ahead, select both of the objects, do Control J to join them back together. Now when we tab into edit mode, it's not actually joined, it's just one mesh. They're not merged together. So what we want to do, since we did add loops to our snake's head, we can do Control R to add a loop here and add a loop to the bottom, which we will do to the other side as well. Go in here. Is there another loop there? Add loops here. I think that's all we are missing. So now we can go ahead. I'm gonna hit Z for wireframe view and hide our subdivision surface modifier. Go ahead, make sure you have both selected, do Alt M, and we're just gonna do at center, oops, for all of them. Alt M at center. Now, actually, let me do this one first. For this part, once you unhide the subdivision surface modifier, it does flare out still. So to make this look a little bit nicer, you can grab these two vertices and do Shift E and start sharpening it kind of like this. You could go all the way, or if you want it to be more of a transition, maybe more like this. But I think actually for this part, I wouldn't mind over here being more of the transition part. So if we do like that, I think that might look nicer. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. And combining these two meshes. At center. Alright, so you should be able to do an Alt right click, and once it works, it should be good to go. Now obviously I want to go ahead and fix this as well. Do Shift E, and then we did more like that. For our snake. Now rigging for this will be pretty easy compared to the mouse and beholder that we've done before. All you really have to do, Shift A, go ahead and do armature, but we're only going to do single bone, and go up here. Gonna move it to be, we start about here. I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it 90. Pull this up. And I want this, I'm gonna go ahead actually go over to the armature tab and hit X-ray so I can see it through the mesh. I'm gonna have this right below the base of the neck. So I'm gonna go more like there. And we're going to tab into edit mode. Pull this all the way to the tip of the tail. W, subdivide, and you'll notice that over here it comes up with number of cuts. So I don't think I really need to do 20 like I did 20 for the array. I think I'm gonna try 10 and see how that looks. That should be okay, but just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna see how 14 looks. Yeah, I like 14 a little better. So that way they're all the same exact size and it works perfectly. So I'm going to move them down to match the tip of the tail. We'll grab this one, do E to extrude. Pull that up. E to extrude, pull that all the way to the tip of the nose. And then we also want to do E to extrude, but we are going to do Alt P, disconnect bone, grab that. You'll notice that there's still a dotted line here. That's because it's parented to this main part, but we can kind of grab this bone, rotate it to fit with the jaw, so we can kind of do what we want with it. Let's do kind of like that. That should work for us. So this will be our headpiece all the way down to the tail. Okay, so once you have your bones all set up, we'll select the mesh and then the armature, do Control P, and do with automatic weights. Give it a second and then it should be good, which this one's not that complicated, so probably didn't have to do anything crazy. We'll switch over to pose mode. And right now we do have rest position, pose position. So you're to actually pose it, you'll want to be in pose position. And we'll start testing it out. So if we rotate this, you'll notice that it's moving the mesh with it, which is perfect. So now that you have it all rigged up, you can start posing it. So I'm going to see if, yeah, so since we did it in that direction, this will still control the rest of the tail. This one should control the head, which it does. You'll notice the jaw doesn't move with it, which is good. That way it still just kind of is attached to the neck piece. So we'll move this. Awesome, it's moving. I mean, those were pretty dramatic, but it'll move with the bone as we grab it, depending on how we need it. But it does move with the neck. Awesome. Cool, so that worked just like we intended it to. If you guys have any questions, please be sure to put them in the comments below. I know I kind of went over that a little quickly, but other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you guys have fun posing the newly created poisonous snake for 5E. But yeah, like I said, feel free to post any comments. I had an idea so that way we could stick to Tuesdays being the sets and furniture pieces or props or whatever. But in addition to that, start doing every first Monday of the month, having it as a Monster Monday so we can increase the videos. So if you guys like the idea of doing a Monster Monday, the first Monday of the month, and then keeping our regular every Tuesday schedule as scenery and props for D&D, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I would love your feedback. And then let me know if you have any requests for Monster Monday. I know I've gotten a request for an owl bear. Trust me, I'm working on it. That one's gonna probably be a little bit longer to get out since it's pretty intricate of a request, but don't worry, I got your request. I'm working on it, and anything else, let me know. I am happy to reply back and help you guys with what I can. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video, and I will see you guys next week.